Back now on Triad Today. Always glad we can spend a few minutes with Kevin Baker. Of course, you know him from being on the show many times before. Executive Director of Piedmont Triad International Airport. A very, very busy man with a lot of responsibilities, but we appreciate you dropping by. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Well, good, except I'm a little confused. You sent me an email not long ago, and you said you wanted to talk about something called MRO. Now, I know you aeronautical guys and everything get real fancy with these abbreviations, but you're talking over my head. Now, what is MRO and what does it stand for, and why do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, well, MRO in our world is maintenance, repair, and overhaul. So basically think service station for airplanes.
Okay.
And I think why it's important to talk about here is that that's where a large part of the base of our employment is. We've got a lot of MROs on the airport, and a lot of people for many decades have been working in that industry.
Let's list some of the companies, because when people ride by the airport and they've read things in the newspaper, they'll recognize some of these names from headlines and whatever. Give me 4 or 5 examples of MROs.
Yeah, so there's HAECO, of course, which most folks know, and that's the largest of them. Marshall, our new tenant, will be starting here in the next few months. They're also a fairly large global MRO. And then there's smaller ones such as Honda and Cessna who have MROs for their own operations. And then even our fixed base operators, which is the place where you can keep an airplane if you own an airplane or if you need to get it maintained. That's Signature Aviation and Corey Aviation.
Now, what does it mean? You also sent me something one day about a term called a third-party MRO. Now, what is that, and how is that different from? Are there just certain ones that you mentioned that are third-party MROs and ones that aren't?
Yeah. So the easiest way to think of this is to put it in terms of an automobile. You've got a Honda automobile, for instance. You can choose whenever you need maintenance to be done on that. You can choose to take it to the Honda dealership, and that's the MRO. Or you can take it to any service station that you want to use, which would be a third-party MRO.
I got you.
Working for, they can work on that vehicle or on that airplane in this case.
Let me circle back to something you mentioned, because I should have asked this before, but when you talked about employment, overall, not just with MROs, but overall, what kind of employment numbers? How many people are out there in or around the PTI campus that are working?
Yeah, there's roughly 9,000 people that are working there right now, and more to come with Marshall adding on soon. The MRO portion of that is probably roughly a quarter of it, I would say, 2,000, 2,500, something like that.
What does that mean, again, without talking over my head too far, which isn't hard to do, but what kind of economic impact are we talking about for for this area, for the community, when you have that many people working?
Yeah, so the state comes up with these numbers each year. These are not my numbers, but the impact of the airport is $9 billion a year to the state's economy. The airports in general are huge parts of the economic output of the state, roughly 10%. If you aggregate all the airport's output as a percentage of the state's domestic product.
Good grief. Before time gets away from us, I'm just curious, and maybe this is going to sound like I'm just throwing you a question so that you can brag on yourself or brag on the airport, but Kevin, what is it that you think attracts so many of these companies to PTI, to the PTI campus? I mean, what is it? What's the draw?
Well, there's a lot of things, but we've got a set of assets that really doesn't appear anywhere else in the country, and in my opinion, in the world. And that is, it starts with location, where we are in the world, in the country. I think that, the cost of doing business, the cost of living, both very low. It's a great place to work, great place to live. You've got roadway systems around us that are, I think, just completely unparalleled in this country. And then, zooming down to the airport, you've got an airport with long parallel runways. You've got 1,000 acres of land. And then, finally, we've been purposefully heading in that direction for a long time and planning for these companies to come here and have a place to go.
Now it's coming to fruition. Before we wrap up, I never ask you anything personal because we got so many other things to cover that aren't personal, but how old were you when you first were a passenger on an airplane?
I was 5 years old. My parents and I flew Northwest Orient Airlines to D.C., where my brother flew his F-4 in. He was in Vietnam at the time, and flew an F-4 into Andrews Air Force Base, and we went to see him.
5 years old. Were you excited?
Oh, it was crazy excited, yes.
That's great. That's neat. So I learned something about you. Up on screen, flyfrompti.com. Gives you all sorts of information on that. I hope you will check that out. Kevin Baker for shared a few of his precious moments with us, and back he goes to the airport. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, we'll be right back.